On the night of Jesus' arrest, after sharing a meal with his closest followers, Jesus went off to pray. And at this point in the story, things begin to turn. We can see Jesus becoming separated from those he loves. Two of our Year 10s, Zach and Owen, will share a paraphrase of the events that took place in the garden where Jesus prayed alone.
When they left the upstairs room, Jesus and the disciples went out to the Garden of Gethsemane. They had come here many times before. Jesus tells them to keep awake and to pray. Then he goes a little distance away and gets face down on the ground to pray. Later, Jesus comes back to where his apostles are. What do you think they're doing? They're asleep. 3 times Jesus tells them they should keep awake, but each time he returns, he finds them sleeping. How can you sleep at a time like this? Jesus says. The last time he comes back, the hour has come for me to be handed over to my enemies. Just at that moment, the noise of a large crowd can be heard.
There's men are coming with swords and gloves, and they are carrying torches to give them light. When they get closer, someone steps out from the crowd and comes right up to Jesus. He kisses him. As you can see here, it's one of his disciples. It's Judas Iscariot. Jesus asks Judas, "Do you betray me with a kiss?"
The kiss is a sign. It lets the men with Judas know that Jesus is the man that they want to arrest.
So Jesus' enemies step forward to grab him. But Peter is not going to let them take Jesus without a fight. He pulls out the sword that he has brought along and strikes at a man near him. The sword just misses the man's head and chops off his right ear. But Jesus touches the man's ear and heals it. Jesus tells Peter, "Return your sword to its place. Don't you think that I can ask my Father for thousands of angels to save me?" Yes, he can, but Jesus doesn't ask God to send any angels, because he knows that the time has come for his enemies to take him. So he lets them lead him away. The disciples all scatter in fear.
The oddly named Good Friday reminds us of the very real existence of loneliness, of suffering, of all that's wrong with the world. It's tempting to list what's wrong with our world. We can each call to mind the suffering of our neighbours, near and far. Before our students share with us a retelling of Jesus' crucifixion, I invite you to take this time to be still. Treat it as a space for lament, a time to recognise the pain that we and our world experience.
Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they slapped him in the face. Once more, Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and the officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify."
So the soldiers took charge of Jesus. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side, and Jesus in the middle. Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened to the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read the sign, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and the sign was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek.
Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there, and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here is your son," and to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time on, the disciple took her into his home. Later, knowing that everything had now been finished, and so that Scripture would be fulfilled, Jesus said, "I am thirsty." A jar of wine vinegar was there, so they soaked a sponge in it, put the sponge on a stalk of the hyssop plant, and lifted it to Jesus' lips. When he had received the drink, Jesus said, "It is finished." With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit.
Later, Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Now Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly because he feared the Jewish leaders. With Pilate's permission, he came and took the body away. He was accompanied by Nicodemus, the man who has earlier visited Jesus at night. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it with the spices and in strips of linen. This was in accordance with Jewish burial customs. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb, in which no one had ever been laid, because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there.
Does the sadness and stress and injustice we often experience in our world threaten to defeat us? The theologian Alan Lewis points to Holy Saturday as a new way of being. On Holy Saturday, the cold presence of the tomb, Jesus and all he stood for trapped behind an immovable rock, speaks of collapsed confidence and abolished optimism. This was the experience of the disciples, wherever it is that they had fled to. But the bleakness of their situation and the cruel insinuations of the tomb open us, as it would eventually open them, to the possibility of a different way of looking at tomorrow. A way not of fragile, shattered optimism, but of strong, unkillable hope. Alan Lewis says, "For hope, finding space to flourish in the very absence of optimism is the courage not to be swallowed by despair, but in frank acknowledgement of rampant evil and negation, to trust in the possibility for life and creativity amidst and beyond that malignant superpower. Though assuredly not in its denial or in its avoidance. The very realities which banish confidence and legitimize despair also invite a hopeful embrace of love's living power to prevail in history." And so the aloneness and the despair of the Holy Saturday is precisely that part of Easter, that part of the story which most closely mirrors so much of our own human experience. We anticipate with hope the life God has promised to us in the resurrection of Jesus.
Jesus' friends were sad. They would never see their best friend again. How could this happen? Wasn't Jesus the rescuer? The King God had promised. It wasn't supposed to end like this.
Yes, but whoever said anything about the end? Just before sunrise on the third day, God sent an earthquake and an angel from heaven. When the guards saw the angel, they fell down with fright. The angel rolled the huge stone away, sat on top of it, and waited.
At the first glimmer of dawn, Mary Magdalene and other women headed to the tomb to wash Jesus' body. The early morning sun slanted through the ancient olive-lit trees, drops of dew glittering on the leaves and grasses, little tears everywhere.
The friends walked quietly along the hilly path, through the olive groves until they reached the tomb, and immediately noticed something odd. It was wide open. They peered through the opening into the dark tomb, but wait, Jesus' body was gone.
And something else. A shiny man was there, with clothes made from lightning. Don't be scared, the angel said. But they couldn't help it. They screamed anyway.
The angel asked them, "What are you doing here?" "This is a tomb, and tombs are for dead people." The woman couldn't speak. "Jesus isn't dead anymore," he said. "He's alive again."
And their hearts leaped. And then the angel laughed with such gladness that they felt for a moment as if they had woken from a nightmare. The other women rushed home, but Mary stayed behind. How could it be true? Jesus was definitely dead. How could he be alive?
Just then, Mary heard someone else in the garden. "Perhaps it's a gardener," she thought. "He'll know where Jesus' body is." "I don't know where Jesus is," Mary said urgently. "I can't find him."
But it was all right. Jesus knew where she was, and he had found her, Mary. Only one person said her name like that. She could hear her heart thumping. She turned around. She could just make out a figure. She shaded her eyes to see, and thought she was dreaming. But she wasn't dreaming. She was seeing Jesus.
Mary fell to the ground. Sudden tears filled her eyes, and great sobs shook her whole body. And all she wanted in that moment was to cling to Jesus and never let him go. "You'll be able to hold on to me later, Mary," Jesus said gently, "and always be close to me. But now, go and tell the others that I'm alive."
Mary ran and ran, all the way to the city. She had never run so far or fast in her life. She felt she could have run forever. She didn't even feel like her feet touched the ground. The sun seemed to be dancing and gleaming and bounding across the sky, racing with her and shining brighter than she could ever remember in the clear, fresh air.
And it seemed to her that morning, as she ran, as if the whole world made anew, as if the whole world was singing with joy. The trees, the tiny sounds in the grass, the birds, her heart. Was God really making everything sad come untrue? Was he making even death come untrue? She couldn't wait to tell Jesus' friends. They won't believe it, she laughed. She was right, of course.
This is the part of the story we like to focus on. It is full of surprise and joy. Jesus is alive again. While the sadness and pain of Saturday is very real, so too is the joy of Sunday and the empty tomb. Take this time to feel joy and give thanks as Susanna shares John Schmitz's All of Me.